Well, it's meant to provide rapid healing, but the effect of the magic also reverts the muscle to its original state. Just as well. You'll be going to bodyguard the princess after this, am I right? Yes. Take it, then. Just in case. Use it if anything comes up. The medicine bottle clinked as Gazef set it down by Climb's side. Thank you very much. He sat up, looking at Gazef. He looked upon the man whose swordplay he could not hope to match. The unscathed man found it strange and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. I just thought you're really amazing." Gazef's forehead was devoid of sweat. His breathing was calm and regular. Was this the difference between Climb, sprawled on the ground, and the strongest man in the kingdom? Climb sighed, but he was satisfied with this outcome. Gazef, on the other hand, seemed to be grinning. Really now? Well, why, if you want to ask why I'm so strong, I can't rightfully give you an answer. Basically, I was talented. Incidentally, I learned how to fight as a mercenary. The nobles call my habit of kicking people crude, but I learned it during that time too. There was no secret to becoming strong, Gazef concluded. Climb had thought that repeating the same practice over and over would eventually make him a little stronger, but that had been rejected in an instant. In that sense, you're quite suited for my style of fighting with fists and feet, Climb. Is that so? Oh yes. You haven't been trained as a swordsman or a soldier, but that has its good points too. Once one picks up a sword, it's only natural to focus on using it, but I don't think that's a good thing. I feel that the sword should only be an attack method, alongside punching and kicking and so on. That's a practical fighting style, or a dirty, an adventurer's fighting style. Climb's face was no longer its usual blank slate. There was a smile there now. To think the mightiest man in the kingdom would actually praise his haphazard, slapdash sword skills. He was delighted that his swordsmanship, which the aristocrats scorned, had received such accolades. All right, we'll stop training here. I should go. I need to meet the king in time for his breakfast. Don't you need to hurry to the princess side? No, because the princess has a guest today. A guest? Which noble is that? To think that princess would have a caller. Gazef was quite surprised, and then Climb answered, "Yes, Aindra Sama." Aindra? Oh. Which Aindra is it? From blue, or is it red? That would be Aindra Sama of Blue Rose. Gazef sighed in visible relief. I see, so that was it. So if a friend's come, that means. Gazef had guessed that Renner had barred Climb from her side, because she had a friend over, but the truth was that Climb had gently refused the invitation. While he and the princess had a relationship where they did not need to quibble about trivialities, even Gazef would frown in disapproval if he learned that Climb had refused the invitation of a member of the royal household. Therefore, he did not state the truth, but let Gazef draw his own conclusions. Climb had met Aindra through Renner, and Aindra thought well of him. Surely she would not reject Climb like the other nobles if he were to join them at a dinner party. However, Climb had considered that his mistress, Renner, had almost no friends of the same sex, and he felt that if he, as a man, were not around, the two ladies would be able to speak about personal things they could not normally utter. Thank you very much for today, Gazef Sama. Please, don't stand on ceremony. I had a good time too. If it pleases you, could I ask for your guidance again, like today? Gazef could not answer for a moment. Climb saw his reaction and began to apologize, but Gazef spoke first. That's fine. As long as there's nobody else around, of course. Climb keenly understood Gazef's reluctance, and so he did not say much. He forced his sore, aching body to his feet, and spoke his heartfelt feelings. Thank you very much. Gazef waved back grandly, and strode forth. Then please tidy up here. It would be terrible if I could not meet the king for his morning meal. Oh yes, that downward slash of yours was pretty good. However, you need to think about what comes after that. Consider what you'd do if your strike was dodged or blocked. Yes. Part 4, 3rd day of the lower fire, 9th month, 6:22 After bidding farewell to Gazef, Climb wiped off his sweat with a damp towel, and headed to a place that was drastically different from the training hall of just now. This room was around the same size as the training hall in question. It was filled with many long tables and benches, packed with people chatting happily away. A delicious fragrance filled the warm air of the room. This was the dining hall. After entering the room, Climb passed through the hubbub of humanity, and joined the back of the line. Much like the people in front of him, Climb had several stacked containers in front of him. There was a tray, a wooden dish, a wooden spoon, and finally a wooden cup. He collected his meal in the appropriate order. One slightly larger than usual steamed potato with brown bread, a thick white stew laden with ingredients, pickled cabbage, and a sausage. To Climb, this was a sumptuous meal. The dishes smelled fragrant on his tray. Climb looked around the dining hall as the smell prickled at his gut. The noisy soldiers were currently eating. They sat with their friends, and as they ate, they talked about what they would do on their next leave, the food, their families, and other light topics. This was standard fare. Climb spotted an empty seat, and wound through the din as he headed for it. He stepped over the bench and took a seat. There were soldiers on either side of him, chatting heartily with their friends. As Climb sat down, they turned to look at him, but then they immediately lost interest and turned their eyes elsewhere. It was as though Climb sat in the eye of the storm. An onlooker might think this was quite creepy. Though there was cheery conversation all around him, nobody sought out Climb to speak to him. While it was true that nobody would chat up a stranger, they were all soldiers, serving in the same location, and they might need to depend on each other in times of mortal danger. From that point of view, their attitude was quite strange. It was as though Climb did not exist to them. On his part, Climb did not plan to speak to anyone else, because he clearly understood his position. The guards in Overlord Keep were not mere soldiers. Soldiers in the royal army included conscripts armed and outfitted by the lords of various domains, mercenaries hired by the cities, guards tasked with patrolling the cities, and so on. However, the one thing they had in common was that they were all of low birth. Of course, allowing commoners of uncertain provenance to approach the royal household and the palace, with its many secrets, would cause a lot of problems. Therefore, the guards of Overlord Keep had to be recommended by a noble. If the guards caused any problems, their sponsoring noble would bear the blame for them. Therefore, all the candidates were pure and upstanding citizens. However, this practice led to a certain phenomenon. That was factionalization. All the sponsoring nobles belonged to one faction or another. The troops they recommended would naturally join their masters' factions. Since anybody who opposed the nobles had no chance of being picked at all, it was hardly a leap to say that all the soldiers here were affiliated with one faction or another. It sounded purely disadvantageous, but it had a benefit in that the soldiers constantly honed their skills lest they be drawn into a factional conflict. While they were still nowhere near the level of the Imperial Knights, the Keep's guards had some measure of skill. Of course, Climb was much more skilled than them, but the nobles had managed to find fault even with that. After all, he was stronger than the troops which the nobles themselves had put forward. While it was true that the sponsoring nobles might not belong to a faction, under the current circumstances, the kingdom was split into the noble and the royal faction. Under these circumstances, there was only one noble who could flit between both sides like a bat. There was a similar individual among the serried ranks of hand-picked troops. That individual was Climb. Climb was in a very awkward position. Originally, someone like Climb could not possibly hope to stand by Renner's side. As one of common birth, he would never be entrusted with the weighty task of defending royalty. It had always been that only nobles could protect the royal household. However, there were exceptions in the form of Gazef Stronov, the kingdom's strongest soldier, and the elite troops under his command. And then, almost nobody could publicly object to Princess Renner's fervent wish. Perhaps a member of the royal household could gainsay her, but since the king, the highest authority in the land, had given his approval, nobody else could object to it. Climb had a personal room due to this awkward position of his. Renner's word had given him a room of his own. But at the same time, it separated him from the others. After all, Climb was not affiliated with any faction, and was uncomfortable in either camp, so he was like a hot potato. Given Climb's situation and background, he should have been a member of the royal faction. However, the royal faction were a group of nobles who had sworn their loyalty to the king, and they did not welcome Climb, whose origins were unknown. In the end, Climb had become a very prickly being to take into their fold. Instead, they chose to leave him alone and wait for him to volunteer to help of his own accord. On the other hand, the noble faction felt that drawing Climb in would have benefits, but it would also be like letting a wolf into their own homes. However, the factions were made of many nobles, and not all of them were of one mind. The factions were ultimately organizations formed for profit. That being the case, while some members of the royal faction gave him the stink eye, because he was a mere commoner who had been allowed to be the closest person to the Golden Princess, others also wanted Climb on their side. In any case, nobody had been careless enough to risk splintering their faction for Climb. In conclusion, both of them considered Climb an asset that neither of them wanted, but which neither of them wanted to surrender to their rivals. That was why nobody spoke to him, and he was left to eat by himself. He did not talk to anyone either, and he paid their business no heed. He simply ate, and finished his breakfast within 10 minutes. "All right, let's go." Sated, he mumbled to himself, a practice picked up from long hours of solitude. Just as he was about to stand up, he bumped into a passing soldier. Climb's face was impassive as an elbow struck the place where he had been hurt while sparring with Gazef, but he froze from the pain. The soldier who had hit him said nothing, just carried on. The soldiers around him kept silent too. Several people furrowed their brows as they saw this, but nobody said anything. Climb sighed deeply, and headed out with his bowl and plate. This much was par for the course. He was simply glad that there was no hot stew in the bowl at that time. Nearly being tripped by an extended foot. People running into him under the pretense of an accident. He was used to these things. However, so what? Climb continued forward. They could not do anything more to him, not in a public place like the dining hall. Climb kept his chin up throughout. His eyes were fixed forward, and he would not waver. If he showed any sign of unseemly behavior, it would cause problems for his mistress Renner. After all, every move Climb made reflected directly on the reputation of Renner, the woman to whom he owed his loyalty. Clone. New paste. Few persons can be made to believe that it is not quite an easy thing to invent a method of secret writing which shall baffle investigation. Yet it may be roundly asserted that human ingenuity cannot concoct a cipher which human ingenuity cannot resolve. Edgar Allan Poe. 184,668 pastes opened. Based on an original idea from sebsavage.net. Sam and Max.